Hello, my name is David Campione, and I would like to welcome you to the world's greatest UFO flying saucer video. The information you are about to see is compiled over 25 years of UFO flying saucer research. This information was gathered together by one of ufologists' most honest and forthright researcher, Michael Campione. What you will see will astound the most knowledgeable ufologists and hopefully will jog your memory about an unusual UFO flying saucer sighting or encounter you may have had sometime during your life. Let's begin this historical journey from the past to the present and hopefully into the future for your own knowledge and information. As you can see, this first slide, this is not a flying saucer, this is the American flag. Long may it wave. What you're looking at here are a series of flying saucers or unidentified flying craft or objects that people have seen over a period of 30 years, which my father, Michael Campione, received rough drawings of these particular craft, and we took these drawings to a commercial artist and had the artist make up a better illustrative visual impactiveness of the craft. And the little lines that you see coming off each craft, like on number 1 and number 10, represent light that was emitting from each craft. The one on the top right, number 3, is very, very similar to the late George Adamski's Venusian scout craft, which he said he went aboard. The Venusian craft went on the mothership and spent some time in Venus. And you could find George Adamski's books in many bookstores this day. The bottom left, number 13, with all the windows in it, there are 2 rows of windows, of 5 windows above each other, where a particular craft was just seen by a woman in our area in Florida in January of 1989. Only thing, it didn't have the windows that we're putting out. Slide representing the various craft that people have seen over the years, which again we're drawing similar to what we saw in the previous slide. Number 14 on the right, again another Venusian type of scout craft, similar to that. The one on the bottom, number 31, if we can zoom in on that a little bit, it represents a porpoise shape, is what we've termed it, gave it that name, the porpoise shape. The interesting aspect of this particular craft, it was seen in and over Audubon, New Jersey, by 2 different women, 5 years apart. Neither of these women knew each other, and it did the exact same maneuver, going from coming from a northwesterly direction into a northeasterly direction in Audubon, New Jersey, traveling treetop level, moving very slowly, about 25 miles an hour, just going above the treetops. Where it went, nobody seems to know. No contact was ever made with this particular craft. What we see here are more spaceships that people have seen, and we had a copy made by the commercial artist. The one on the top, number 16, looks very similar to the Adamski cigar-shaped type of craft that people saw. The one in the middle, number 18, is very similar to a former member of the Del Valle UFO that we used to have, who saw something like, it's like a crescent moon, where as she was sitting on her porch one evening near the New Jersey Pine Barrens, the crescent moon did a 180-degree maneuver. And she says, I know it was definitely the moon I was looking at. The one just to the right of that, number 19, it looks like a trainer plane of some kind. It has a wing. This was seen by Michael Campione in 1960, about 5 o'clock a.m. one morning on his way to work, and also by another person similar. And also the 2 reports stated that it was a chartreuse green in color, a pulsating traveling at a very high rate of speed. The one on the left in the middle of the page is beehive shape, number 20. This particular craft has been deemed as violent people who operate this particular spaceship. One gentleman was hunting in Florida, in central Florida, in about the middle of the state, and he came upon this craft, and he went up towards it, and the beam shot down, and knocked him down, and he was blinded for days. People had to come. He had to get help. His buddies took him out, and he was in very, very bad shape. So if you ever see a particular craft like this, definitely avoid it. The occupants have been noted to be hostile. Where they're from, we don't know. We have no idea where they're from. The one on the bottom left, number 27, definitely most unusual craft, similar to a Christian cross, if you would like to say. The one only in the bottom right is very similar, which was taken in 1968, similar to which Mr. Paul Villa photographed the craft out in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And you'll see those in color shortly. This is the last of the series of illustrations that we have of the flying saucers. The one in the upper left, the top left of the page, looks similar to a football shape. Very hostile flying saucer. Extremely hostile, with the intentions of harming us humans on this planet. If you run across something like this, you see it on the ground, in the air, avoid it. Get between you or your car. Do not, I repeat, do not go near this type of craft. It is definitely run by a nuclear power plant and emits a lot of radiation, and people have contracted leukemia from this type of craft. So just be very careful if you see it, and stay away from it. This is a series of photographs of a flying saucer, similar to the, I guess, like a Venusian type or Saturn type of craft, as they've been termed. The craft, you can see, is kind of stationary and did some maneuvering in it while the person was in an airplane. Most interesting design, definitely an unusual type of craft. Craft in this photograph, the flying saucer, taken in McMinnville, Oregon, 1951, up in the upper right-hand corner. It looks like an old World War I German Kaiser helmet. Now, this particular craft was not debunked by the Dr. Condon report of many years ago in 1970. He did a research to destroy all credibility of flying saucers, period, that everything is negative, a typical government ploy. This particular craft, he could not disprove that it was not a real craft. Checked into the background of these farmers in McMinnville, Oregon. This is the close-up of the McMinnville, Oregon, so it's quite enlarged. You can see that there is some sort of antennae, part of a structure, taken with the type of camera and the film that they used in 1950. You can see there's a lot of grain in it, but it is definitely some flying structure of some kind. This photograph taken over ruined France, March 1954, very similar to the previous photograph taken over McMinnville, Oregon. You can see very much resembles the World War I German Kaiser helmet. Whether were German craft, I cannot speculate. I do not know. The features that these particular craft that we have seen do take on the structure of being man-made on this planet, not of the real extraterrestrial type light-being crafts that we shall see soon. This photograph taken by Mr. Rex Heflin of Orange County, California road inspector, August 3rd, 1965. He was a county road engineer. Stopped on the side of the road, was doing some observing, always had a camera with him to take photographs of specific items. I guess apparently he was sitting having his coffee, and he noticed this out of a corner of his eye, this object, this flying saucer coming across just above. As you can see, it's just above the telephone poles. And he took this first photograph out the window. And for years, people said it was a hoax. They were throwing a hubcap, but when people quit looking at the craft itself and really analyzed what was going on directly beneath the craft, just off to the shoulder of the road, on the far side, the dirt and dust and debris is being kicked up from the craft's electromagnetic force field. This is one of the things that we've, in the UFO groups, have said is definitely a real photograph, one of the major. Nobody ever pursued this particular type of situation. The flying saucer went over the road, went over a field and hovered, and Mr. Heflin took this photograph. Mr. Heflin took another photograph just as it started to ascend, and he said it went off at a high rate of speed and just disappeared. This photograph was taken of a Saturn flying saucer. We termed the craft called Saturn due to the ring around the exterior of this craft, similar to the planet Saturn. It was taken by a Brazilian naval photographer. There was a Brazilian naval warship off the coast of Trinidad, and there was a high-level meeting going on with the Army brass of those of South American countries. And this particular craft hovered over this hill on the island for 30 minutes. They photographed. Everybody came out on deck and looked at it. Nobody felt intimidated, did not make any aggressive moves towards the naval vessel or anybody aboard. Nobody felt any remorse or aggravation from this particular craft. And it took off. It just left after 30 minutes. The British naval photographer more naturally processed the film, and they looked it over with the prints, made enlargements of this particular craft. It was passed around the Brazilian Congress, which is similar to our governmental setup in Washington, D.C., and they just termed it. Nobody was harmed. It wasn't hostile. They didn't. It wasn't one of theirs. They didn't know if it was anybody else's, and nobody was threatened. So they just pushed it off as, well, it's some craft, and fine. Just, keep an eye out. Maybe we'll see some more. Maybe we can contact them if they are extraterrestrial. Series is most interesting. It looks like a hula hoop in the sky, but they always said, somebody threw a ring up there. But what we found out, it's definitely a monitoring type craft. The ring, the diameter, we do not know, or the width or the circumference of the ring, we do not know. This was taken by a gentleman outside of New York City. He was told by a couple children who were outside playing it there was a thing in the sky, and he came out and looked at it, went back in, got his camera, and came out and snapped this photograph. The next picture shows the craft being absorbed, the monitoring craft absorbing itself in the clouds for less detection from either radar or from passing planes or from just visual observation from people on the ground. You can see by this shot it's totally absorbed in the clouds now. So if you're outside and you see, if you're fortunate enough to live in a nice section of the world or the United States, and there's clear skies or nice puffy clouds at times, and you see a circular cloud and the other clouds are going the other way, send a mental contact up to see if you can contact these type of spaceships. Photograph taken by astronaut John McDivitt, June 4th, 1965, using a 16mm Eastman Kodak color film camera while it was orbiting our Earth. What it is, it looks like a flying saucer or some sort of artifact. Definitely not one of ours, or possibly, I doubt if it's one of the Russians either. Well, it's an unusual shape. We don't have craft of this kind of shape flying around any place. especially in 1965. A couple more NASA photographs taken by United States astronaut Scott Carpenter, May 24th, 1962, while he was in the Aurora 7 in space. Definitely the top photograph, which definitely looks like a Venusian type of spacecraft, scout craft. Could be possibly from the moon base, just while they were observing our satellite. They came up to take a look, and he just happened to take a photograph of it. And the second photograph is where it's disappearing, getting ready to take off, and that's why you get that the movement and motion like that. Very famous photograph taken August 30th, 1951, called the Lubbock Lights of Texas, the infamous Lubbock Lights of Texas, by Mr. Carl Hart Jr. It's been analyzed by many corporations, including Kodak, and a lot of people say it was definitely lens flare, but having a photographic background, I do not know where you get lens flare at night. I've never seen lens flare at night. If you don't have light, you can't get lens flare. So anybody that tells you it's lens flare, don't believe them. It's definitely a group of flying saucers in a V type of formation. It just was hanging over Lubbock, Texas. A couple of years ago, I read in our local paper in Florida that they were starting to have an annual picnic and celebrate the famous Lubbock Lights of Texas. Now, I don't know if it's still continuing or not, but you could probably contact the local Chamber of Commerce there in case you're interested in getting in touch with them. This is a series of stills from a 16mm movie camera that Dr. Dan Fry from Oregon had photographed. Mr. Fry, or Dr. Fry, was contacted mentally by a voice in his head to get his camera and come to a certain spot in Oregon. I believe it was around the Mount Hood area. And he went to the designated spot that he was told to go, and he looked up and he was waiting around. He seen his flying saucer come in. You gotta realize he's filming this at the whole time. This is a shot of it as it came in closer to Dan. He was told it was 300 feet in diameter. The black lines that you see are the windows on this large craft. Where they were from, I don't recall whether Dan ever said or if he was told where these beams were from. The glass is covered by a metal shield when it travels outside of the atmosphere of any planet. So no space debris of any kind will puncture the glass and cause a lot of problems upon the ship. Dan ran out of film. It was passing overhead, and he said as he went by, he looked up. When the film ran out, he was looking up. He could see people waving down at him through the glass, sort of like a cruise ship, taking one of our cruise ships on the ocean and looking down at the fish or the whales. Well, here the extraterrestrials were coming over and looking at Earth, and Dr. Dan Fry and waving to them. Human beings, not any little aliens of any kind, real human beings, as humans as we know it on this planet. This was taken from an airplane somewhere over Japan, and as you can see the cigar-shaped clouds above the normal clouds. There's 3 motherships just hovering and taking on somewhat of a cloud formation. One of the many things that they do, some of the motherships that we see, or people do see, they range from 1.5 miles in length to 100 miles in length. A lot of craft have been seen at 10 miles in length. So if you're ever in an airplane and you're looking out, gazing out the window, which they usually fly above the clouds, look down. You may see something. If you have a camera with you, and if they allow you to carry a camera on the plane, You never know, you might get a lovely photograph like this. Something to really look forward to. This series is probably one of the most incredible taken. A gentleman named Mr. Manguzzi and his companion went on a picnic near Rome, Italy. And as they were spread out with their picnic basket and their blanket, and they had the food out and the wine and I guess the cheese and bread, whatever they took, and the camera, they heard this whirring noise behind them. And as they looked behind, they saw this craft, small craft about 35 feet in diameter, coming over the ridge. And as you can see in the photograph, we go to the right side where it flips upside down, and you can see the convex sticking out from the craft. As it's coming in, he said, then it lands on the center and left. The craft has landed. It's on the ground. On the right, you can barely see, coming around the left side of the craft, an occupant or a being in a spacesuit walking around the craft. And on the bottom photograph, you can even see the pilot better. And Mr. Manguzzi said the pilot of this particular craft walked around, never even looked at him, looked the craft over, got back in and took off. The interesting thing about it, he said there were no country markings of any kind to identify it, whether it's the United States or Canadian or Russia or China or Brazilian. Nobody seems to know, and it just, no markings, and it just took off. But if you really can look at the suit that the pilot has, very, very similar to our early astronaut suits. You can see the antenna coming up over the right shoulder, the bubble face and the gloves, you know, the awkward lookingness of this particular suit, very similar to the early astronaut suits. And if we can zoom in on that, you can probably get a better look at it. Most interesting series. Well, the United States Air Force was up doing a little publicity shoot of one of their jet trainer fighters of years ago in the 50s. And everything went well until they developed the prints, and as you can see by the arrow on the right, there was a small monitoring disc of some sort following this particular jet plane. And you can see the insert on the left, the enlargement of this particular craft. A very small monitoring, it is not. There are no little green people or any little people in this particular type of craft. This is a cutaway drawing of the interior and exterior of a Venusian scout craft. The gentleman who designed it, he's passed on now, Mr. X, and he wanted to remain anonymous, and we will not give his name out even over this. The features are very comparable to the George Adamski's photographs of scout ship, and even in Adamski's books he has the cutaway drawings of these craft inside. Very similar control panel. The column in the middle is where an implosion takes place, which somehow operates a power coil, which is on the top edge of this craft. It goes all the way around it, and you can see that very closely of it. It's not cracked, it's just strictly illustration that's going on in there. The next to the center column on the floor behind the occupant, standing there, there is a magnifying type of glass where they can look down at the planet or anything else that they zoom. It's actually directional and extreme magnification. One of the more interesting nighttime shots taken of a photo of a flying saucer over Beaver County, Pennsylvania in August 8th, 1965. Most unusual type of craft, definitely a flying saucer. When you do nighttime photography of these crafts, it's most difficult to do because they're always moving very quickly. and this one he was very fortunate to capture. This probably with a very high-speed film and pushing the film. We're going to begin with a series taken by a Mr. Paul Villa, taken during the daytime with color film outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico. Mr. Villa has a most interesting background. His first encounter with a flying saucer was during the time he was working for the Los Angeles County Beach Sanitation Cleanup Department, I believe that's what they call them. And he was picking up trash off the beach, and he had a camera with him, and he saw his first flying saucer. So he took a photograph of it. And he was told, he heard mentally, he was told, was not mental telepathy, it was a voice he heard with inside his head, that he was not allowed to release his photograph until they authorized him to. But not this particular craft we're looking at. This is another craft that he did earlier in the I believe in 1962. Well, Mr. Villa thought, well, he could use some extra money, so he went and had the film processed and then took it to the newspapers, and they published it. And he had a lot of bad things go wrong to him. He lost his job, he lost his wife, and he lost his house. And he did not heed the warnings that do not release these photographs. Well, Paul needed some change of scenery, and he decided to move to Albuquerque, New Mexico. He's an auto mechanic. Went into become an auto mechanic. And while he was living in Albuquerque, again, he was contacted by the flying saucer people, and particularly this group here. He heard the voice in his head and said, Paul, get your camera and come on out to such and such place and outside of Albuquerque, about 20 miles from Albuquerque. And he refused. He said, I do not want anything to do with you people. You've ruined my life before. The other people who came, everybody, they ruined it. And they told him, well, they told you, the other space beings, not to release the photographs until you were told when to do it. And you went and did it. Well, they kept it, and Paul wouldn't have anything to do with him, and I guess a couple months had passed, and then he finally convinced him, and he went out there, 20 miles outside of Albuquerque. And here comes the first craft that came in over his pickup truck. This was taken in 1966. The craft left its hovering position, banked around the trees. As the craft flying saucer was banking around the trees, Paul snapped another shot as he was moving to photograph it. You can see propulsion type of tubes, we call them propulsion, stick coming out the back of the craft. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. I don't know if we can zoom in closer on that. The flying saucer made its maneuvers around the trees. It settled in an area and hovered so it would not harm the planet. Paul snapped another photograph of it. You can see the craft's similar window openings back to the Dan Fry pictures, but only of a smaller diameter spaceship. This craft came in closer. It's about a quarter of a mile away from Paul right now. And you can see the bars where the glass is, where the shields come down and protect it when it's from space debris, when it's traversing throughout the solar systems and galaxies. Paul was told this is 160 feet in diameter. After this was taken, this photograph, Mr. Vila said the craft came down right where it is and hovered right above the ground. A doorway opened, and out walked 9 beings, 4 women and 5 men, all 7 to 9 feet tall, perfectly proportioned, beautiful complexions, all emitting the Christ light of love from each one of them. And they were not here to harm Paul. Paul doesn't really realize what his mission was, but to photograph these particular craft. He photographed the beings. We were unable to get the negatives or photographs, as Paul was told. Do not release the pictures until you are told of the beings. The people from this craft were from the constellation Spiral Galaxy Como Berenices, or Bernices, however you want to pronounce it, approximately 450 million light years away. And this is taken in 1966. Not science fiction, this is a real photograph, flying saucer. This particular photograph in 1972 was analyzed by the CIA, and I was there in the room when they were doing it for 30 minutes. They had it projected on the wall, an immense wall of a home just set up to cover the slide to cover the whole wall, and they went over this thing with a fine-tooth comb for 30 minutes and could not find wires, could not see anything. And I told them, I said their whole problem was that they were all jealous or envious because they're unable to talk about what they know, and which is typical with not only our United States government, but the governments of the world. Another photograph of the craft from Como Berenices. A few years later, Mr. Paul Vila was again contacted by a spaceship. He heard the voice in his head, and he said, come on out to the such and such place about 15 miles outside of Albuquerque, and you can take some photographs of our craft. And you'd see what Paul was driving at the time. So he got his camera, got in his truck, and went out. He was very at ease now with the space beings. And his craft came up and hovered, and while it was hovering, right directly beneath the craft, a fire started from the major amount of turbulence from this craft. And in the process, they told Paul they could not come any closer because it was too powerful a craft. And it started a fire. A tree is bending over. I don't know if we can isolate that, take a closer look at it. But the fire was burning right up the tree, and Paul said a light beam came down out of the craft and extinguished the fire, and he photographed what was going on, but the beam did not record on the film, and you can see the smoke from the debris. One of the trees on the left is bending over from the turbulence force. They told Paul they're going to have to leave the area and maneuver around so they do not harm the planet. They are not allowed to harm the planet. And they apologized for causing this fire. This is the craft after it maneuvered to a safe area where it would not harm the planet, just stay there. Paul was told this is 360 feet in diameter. I maneuvered a little closer before it took off, and this was the last shot that Paul Vila got of this particular spacecraft. Where they were from, he never said. In 1972, Paul Vila was again contacted mentally to get his camera, go out to a certain area outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico, about 20 miles out, which they call the desert, their desert region. So he drove out there, and he parked his car, and he got out, and he looked around, and he saw these, he had this feeling, the impression to look in this one direction and take a picture, and these three little balls appear. So he photographed them. You can see by Paul's car what he was driving at the time. This was 1972. What had happened, one of the balls went around to the back of the Cadillac, and it gave you can see that flash of light or flare. It exploded, and the other two were just went off someplace. And disappeared. A small flying saucer with a silver ball. You can see the silver ball. I think you can see my marker right there, just to the right of the craft above it. You can see this craft is maneuvering around, and just behind it, at about 10:30 or 11 o'clock, there's another little silver ball following this particular craft. You have a shadow down in here from where the sun is. One of the interesting things about this that people don't realize, it's only 3.5 feet in diameter. That's 36 inches, this small craft. There are no little people in this. Again, here's a craft maneuvering. Notice the little antenna on top, and there's a silver ball out about 11 o'clock behind it. Here's the craft again coming in a little closer, and a silver ball directly above it. Notice the shadow on the ground. Maybe we can zoom in and isolate this craft and silver ball. Here's a small monitoring craft hovering. Have a silver ball directly above it. The shadow on the ground. Again, there are no people inside this craft. It is strictly a monitoring device, 36 inches in diameter. It sends information, air samples, soil samples back to the mothership. It's more or less like a probe. How the silver balls that are around it, which you'll see more shortly, operate and how they deal with it, we were unable to find out. One of the interesting things with Paul Villa was that over the 8 years that he corresponded with my father and given the information on his craft, some things he just was not told, or they told him he would not understand. Now here's the craft coming in for a landing. Paul said it hovered, and just as it was hovering, the tripod legs, landing gear, shot straight down out of this craft. Directly above it, if we can get in and isolate this, you can see a ball directly above it. Off to the left about 10 o'clock and one about 9 o'clock, a silver ball in the sky. But the most interesting thing about this craft, which a lot of people said, oh, this is all phony and stuff, is remote control. Well, of course it's remote control because it was done by this mother spaceship. Right underneath it, directly underneath the craft, at the bottom of the frame, is the dust being kicked up from the turbulence of this electromagnetic force field from this small craft. Very, very similar, or the exact same thing to the previous craft that Mr. Villa photographed, where it caused problems and created a fire. And also, if you can think back to the Mr. Rex Heflin photograph from California, where underneath the craft on the shoulder road, the dirt and dust were being kicked up. There are no people in this craft, strictly a monitoring device. Here's the craft on the ground. And while it's sitting there, there's a ball directly above it, same steel ball, about 10:30. There's another ball just hovering there in the sky. Mr. Villa went in, got a little closer, or should I say a lot closer. Villa got even closer. See the perfect machinery done on this particular craft, the way these extraterrestrial beings really know how to make equipment. This is as close as Paul got, and his camera went out of focus. You've reached that point with all cameras. Unless you have macro lenses, which he did not have on his camera. He used a Ricoh camera for all his photographs, R-I-C-H-O, C-O-H, Ricoh. Again, Paul was contacted by the extraterrestrial beings, and they told him where to go outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico again. And he went out, parked his car, and went to the designated spot, as they told me. When they explained to him with the directions where to go, it was exactly to the exact spot and where to stand to do his photographs. And as this, Paul got out there and he walked around, and he got to the spot. This craft was just sitting there hovering on its side now. Not normal. This is not a normal. It's a convex lens shape. The three ball-type things on the bottom are the landing gear that the tripod-type legs come out from the bottom of the craft, and that's the balls that set on the ground. This craft, Paul was told, is 300 feet in diameter. And while Paul was standing there, and he was receiving this information through the voices that were coming to him, two small craft, like we previously saw, monitoring craft, left this particular mothership and took off. And then Paul was told, it was like a couple minutes later, Paul was told, take a photograph as you see us right now, and he snapped a picture, and he didn't know what was going on till later. But when he analyzed the photographs, they told him to analyze the pictures when you're done and look at the clouds. What they did, the two small monitoring discs went up and sculpted an American Indian reclining in the clouds. To the left, you can see the feather, you can see his forehead, you can see his nose, his mouth, his chin down to his neck, down his chest. He's laying in a prone position with his hands folded. They had quite an affection for the American Indian, keepers of the planet. The craft maneuvered. Paul got nervous. As you can see, he jiggled the camera in his movement, snapped the photograph. The Indian's feather is beginning to smoke and the clouds dissipating. Clouds don't last long in their formations, as you all know. If you've ever looked at a cloud formation that you liked, they don't last. The craft is getting into a maneuvering position. It's on edge towards Paul. The craft turned upside down, as we call upside down, because you can see an antenna protruding out, and zoomed off at such a high rate of speed, and that's one of the reasons, the condition of the photograph, that was heading up to take off. The Indian is completely gone from the clouds. Does not exist. Dissipated into the atmosphere. This is the last of the series of photographs that Paul Villa ever did, at least to our knowledge that he ever did. He was told to, we're going to come around the house this time and see how he lived. This is a very small monitoring craft, 36 inches in diameter, and as Paul was climbing around, and this small craft was just running around or floating around and flying around his home where he lives at in Albuquerque, where he did live in Albuquerque. And he snapped this photograph of that same small craft and maneuvering around some of the old cars he had laying around the yard. Here we can isolate this. Here's the craft hanging over one of his old pickup trucks. Again, this is 36 inches in diameter, 3 feet around. There are no people in it. It's a completely sealed monitoring probe type of craft. And here's the craft again. It was sort of like playing with Paul, cat and mouse, just flying around as he would take pictures of it. There were a lot more to the series, and I just edited down, put these few in here. They came home. They came to his house. Just see him. Not a photograph of a flying saucer on the right-hand side. That is the moon. It's a cover-up. This was a cover of Life magazine, 1965, after the blackout. And in the upper left-hand corner is what this is all about. That's a large, large mothership. The caption says it's a light streak or a jet trail is what the official word was from corresponding with the Life magazine editors. And you do not get a jet trail at night. Prior to the blackout, 3 different couples in New Jersey and in Pennsylvania in different areas and at different times contacted my father, Michael Campione, after the blackout about seeing a huge mother-shaped type flying saucer, as we call flying saucer, not the round, but a long broom handle type of craft, approximately 7 to 10 miles in length. And this is what was photographed over New York City. That's the craft that caused the blackout. Through a channel in 1974, when we had the Del Val UFO group in New Jersey, the gentleman who did the channeling, we were able to ask questions, and we asked about this specific photograph and this craft and the blackout, and they said it was done on purpose to show how vulnerable the United States is against an attack. Now you got to realize in 1964 we're getting into the heating up of the Vietnam War. And all they have to do is knock out the power station and you can blanket one whole northeastern corridor, and boy, they did it. And let's just hope that our alleged politicians and people in control have taken steps to prevent this so it can never happen again. Yes, that's our planet Earth. This is where we are. We're living on this planet. This is a photograph of the planet from one of our weather satellites. And the interesting thing about this, in the upper third of this photograph of the planet, is a big crevice opening. Very possible the opening that Admiral Byrd flew into and said he saw vegetation and prehistoric animals in when he flew into the South Pole. This is Antarctica. I just found out a couple of years ago this is Antarctica region where this opening is. Now, I don't know who's telling what or why they won't tell us, our government, but boy, I think, or any government of the world, if they have knowledge of this, I think the people of the world should know what is going on and cut the crap. Another thing, as you look at this planet, this is us, planet Earth, probably taken at, let's say it's 70,000 miles in space or 50,000 miles in space. Now you tell me, by looking at this photograph, whether there's life on this planet. You ever notice how when they send a probe through the solar system, they photograph one of the planets within the solar system, whether Mars or Venus or Jupiter or Saturn, and they go all these thousands and tens of thousands of miles and say, well, there's no life there. Well, there's no life on this planet, is there? By looking at this photograph, there's too much water and cloud coverage. To me, a very unexplainable photograph. At least it's never been explained to me. Taken with one of our weather satellites in the sky, United States weather satellite. I know this transmission will be going around the world. You can see there's a hole in there. I wish they would come out and somebody would explain it. Some of our so-called scientists, well, I don't know what they're, or politicians, I don't know who they're hiding things from or what. I mean, let's just bring it all out in the open. Let's cut the crap and tell everybody what is going on. Let's, time is now. Let's do it. You can see it's most interesting. I mean, there's a hole. There's a hole in our planet. Now, is this for real, or is this a phony photograph, or what? I mean, is this what we're paying for our satellites, and they can't even make a proper photograph of the planet Earth? And how did this hole get in? You can see where the circle is. You can see where the clouds coverages are ended, where it goes right up to the edge of this. Most interesting photograph. How about some public information on this? This was taken in June of 1989, June or July 1989, by a gentleman, I'll just use his first name, Carl, from Jupiter, Florida. Him and a companion of his were driving through Northern California, and they were on a logging road. And he just had this impression to stop the car and get out and photograph this area. I mean, you're photographing into the sun, it isn't a very scenic thing, and he knew it, but he just took the photograph. And when he got it developed, this is what he came up with. And you can see there's a craft there. A lot of this could be lens flare, and I feel some of it is through the reflection of this flying saucer here, with the sun hitting it and causing this other flare and rings all around this craft. This print and took a photograph, isolated the area. Maybe we can even isolate it more. You can see where the trees, if you look at the rings all around, you can see the forest through these rings, but if you look at this craft itself, they're right there in that center. It's the solid mass. There's definitely a flying saucer probably coming out from its fourth dimension and materializing briefly, and Carl just captured it right at that exact moment. Very nice photograph. Very unusual. This was taken near Nipton, California by myself, David Campione. We were doing meditation, my wife and I, on a hill looking over the valley, as you can see, and there weren't hardly any clouds, and we were just sitting there relaxing. And I just had the camera with me, and I took the picture. And I only had, unfortunately, I didn't have my telephoto with me, but maybe we can isolate this with the video setup. And it's a most unusual cloud formation. Could be a flying saucer hiding in there, very possible. I didn't feel one way or the other whether there was or was not. You'll have to excuse my artwork. I am definitely not an artist, and I just put this together quite quickly. After we left the area where the previous photograph was taken, my wife was driving the car, and this is the car down in the lower left-hand corner of the road. It was taken November 23rd, 1988 at 10 a.m. And we were driving along, my wife was driving, and I looked out, which would be west. And I thought, there's all these canyons and rock formations sticking up, and I said, oh my gosh, there's going to be a huge plane crash because there's a plane coming down through the canyons. And as it came past, but nothing ever happened. I never saw any wings on this. All I saw was this upsweep tails. What I thought a plane was coming in, it was going to crash. It was an emergency crash landing. Had no idea how big it was. It faded. It was coming into physical appearance in a gray, and then it went into a black, and then it faded back out to a grayish white and disappeared. I never did see it again. It was all happened in a matter of a few seconds. So we drove along this road for about a half a mile and found a road going towards that area. And as we turned off on the dirt road back to these rock formations, the mileage was 4.5 miles from where this car diagram is to where this mothership is. 4.5 miles across. We drove on the dry riverbed for a little while, parked the car because it was not a car for, it was not a four-wheel drive vehicle, let's just say that, we didn't want to go any further. And we parked and we kept on walking and walking, and we got to this basic area where this craft was. And we did not see anything, did not feel anything. And I thought, well, maybe I'll throw a rock. And my wife said, no, maybe we better not, because we don't know if any of the occupants of this are hostile or friendly, and they might not like people throwing rocks at their spaceship. So we just I didn't even take a photograph of the area. It was a very large area between these rock formations, and I did not see it again. Most interesting experience. And then we left. We went back to Las Vegas.